There are moments in history when the past feels stable, fixed, almost immovable. Documents survive, languages evolve, meanings are preserved. We trust that what was written can, eventually, be read. That time, though distant, is still accessible through careful study. But every so often, something emerges that resists this quiet order. Something that does not yield. The Voynich Manuscript is one such anomaly. A book, undeniably real. Ink on parchment, pages filled with script, illustrations drawn by a human hand. And yet it remains unreadable. Not undeciphered in the temporary sense, but persistently resistant for centuries. And this is where the contradiction begins. If language is meant to communicate, then what does it mean when a text refuses all interpretation? If writing is meant to preserve knowledge, then what knowledge hides in a script no one can understand? What if this is not simply a lost language, but something far more unsettling? What if the failure is not in the manuscript, but in us? The story of the Voynich Manuscript begins not in the medieval world where it was created, but in the early 20th century, in a quiet, almost forgotten corner of Europe. In 1912, a rare book dealer named Wilfred Voynich arrived at the Villa Mondragone, near Frascati, Italy. The villa, once a Jesuit college, held a collection of ancient manuscripts, some neglected, some overlooked. Among them was a small, unassuming volume. At first glance, it did not appear extraordinary. Its vellum pages were aged but intact. Its ink had faded but not disappeared. But as Voynich examined it more closely, something began to feel wrong. The script was unfamiliar. Not merely obscure, but entirely unknown. No recognizable alphabet. No identifiable linguistic structure. And yet, it was not random. The characters repeated with patterns. Words seemed to follow rules. Lines were carefully arranged, as though composed with intention and precision. This was not chaos. It was order. Just not an order anyone understood. Voynich acquired the manuscript and brought it into the academic world. And from that moment, its quiet resistance began to draw attention. Scholars, linguists, cryptographers, each approached it with the same expectation that, eventually, it would yield. But here is the unsettling part. It never did. To understand the depth of the mystery, one must first consider the physical reality of the manuscript itself. This is not a myth. This is not speculation. This is material. The manuscript consists of approximately 240 pages, though some are missing. The pages are made of vellum-prepared animal skin commonly used in medieval Europe. Radiocarbon dating, conducted in the early 21st century, places the parchment between 1448. This is not a modern forgery. It belongs to the medieval world. The ink, too, has been analyzed. It aligns with materials available during that period. The pigments used in the illustrations reflect authentic medieval practices. And those illustrations, they deepen the mystery. There are botanical drawings, plants that resemble known species, yet do not precisely match any real plant. There are diagrams that suggest astronomical or cosmological themes, circular forms, star-like patterns, structures that hint at movement or cycles. And perhaps most strange of all, there are human figures, often female, depicted in unusual poses, interacting with what appear to be interconnected tubes or vessels, as if part of some elaborate symbolic system. Nothing is overtly fantastical. Nothing clearly impossible. But nothing is clearly identifiable either. History does not break easily. But here, it bends. The text itself is written in what is now referred to as Voynichese, a term not for a known language, but for the script unique to this manuscript. Statistical analysis has shown that the text behaves like real language. Word frequencies follow patterns similar to natural languages. There is structure. There is repetition. There are even what appear to be grammatical rules. And yet, no one has been able to translate a single sentence with certainty. This is not due to a lack of effort. During the 20th century, some of the world's most skilled codebreakers turned their attention to the manuscript. Among them were individuals who had worked on deciphering enemy codes during major wars, experts in cryptography, trained to uncover hidden meaning in the most complex systems. They failed. Not partially, completely. And this is where the debate begins. One interpretation suggests that the manuscript is a cipher, a coded document, deliberately obscured to conceal its true meaning. This would align with medieval practices. where knowledge, particularly alchemical or medical, was sometimes encoded to protect it. But if it is a cipher, it is unlike any known system. Typical ciphers rely on substitution, transposition, or other methods that can, given enough time and analysis, be unraveled. The Voynich Manuscript resists all such approaches. Attempts to apply known cryptographic techniques have produced no consistent results. Another interpretation suggests that it may represent an unknown or constructed language, a system created by an individual, perhaps for personal use or intellectual exploration. This would explain the internal consistency of the text, as well as its resistance to external interpretation. But here is the complication. Creating a language of this complexity and maintaining its structure across hundreds of pages would require immense effort and discipline. Why would someone do this and leave no explanation? A third possibility is more unsettling in its simplicity: that the manuscript is meaningless. A sophisticated hoax, a carefully constructed illusion of language, designed to appear meaningful while containing no real content. Some researchers have proposed that the text could have been generated using simple methods, repeating patterns, modifying symbols, creating the appearance of structure without true semantics. But this theory, too, encounters resistance. The statistical properties of the text are too refined, too consistent, too aligned with natural language behavior. A meaningless text would likely reveal its emptiness under scrutiny. The Voynich Manuscript does not. And so, the uncertainty persists. Over time, new technologies have been applied to the problem: digital analysis, machine learning, pattern recognition tools far beyond what early scholars could imagine. Each promising a breakthrough, each offering new perspectives. And yet, the core mystery remains unchanged. No definitive translation, no confirmed origin, no clear purpose. Even its authorship is uncertain. Some have speculated connections to known historical figures. Roger Bacon, for example, a medieval scholar associated with experimental knowledge. Others have dismissed such claims as unsupported. There is no signature, no introduction, no explanation, only pages and silence. This silence is perhaps the most unsettling aspect of all, because the manuscript does not behave like something lost. It behaves like something withheld. And this is where the psychological tension deepens. We are accustomed to the idea that knowledge, once created, seeks to be understood. That time may obscure it, but not erase its meaning. That with enough effort, patience, and intelligence, the past can be recovered. But the Voynich Manuscript challenges that assumption. It suggests that meaning can exist and remain inaccessible, not temporarily, but indefinitely. And this forces a different kind of question. Not what does it say, but what if we are not meant to know? This is not mysticism. It is not speculation beyond reason. It is the recognition that not all systems are designed for universal comprehension, that some knowledge may be context-bound, dependent on frameworks that no longer exist. A language without its culture, a code without its key, a message without its recipient. In such cases, understanding does not simply require intelligence. It requires alignment with something that has been lost. And this is where history becomes fragile. Because if even one document, one carefully crafted, physically preserved artifact, can resist all attempts at interpretation, then what does that imply about the limits of historical knowledge? How much has been written and remains unreadable? How much has been preserved but not understood? The Voynich Manuscript does not answer these questions. It embodies them. Its pages remain as they were centuries ago. Its ink unchanged, its symbols fixed in silent repetition. It does not evolve. It does not adapt. It waits. Not for discovery, but for recognition. And perhaps that is the final contradiction. That in a world defined by information, by constant decoding and interpretation, there exists a text that stands apart. Not because it is hidden, but because it is visible, entirely present, and yet entirely unknown. There is no conclusion here. No resolution waiting beyond one final insight. Only the quiet persistence of a question that refuses to fade. If language is the bridge between minds, then what does it mean when that bridge exists, but cannot be crossed? And if one book can remain unread for over 500 years, then perhaps the past is not as accessible as we believe. Perhaps, in some cases, it is not waiting to be understood, but simply waiting. And so the manuscript endures, not as a solved puzzle, but as a boundary, a reminder that knowledge is not only something we accumulate, but something we confront, that there are edges to comprehension, and beyond them, silence does not always mean absence. Sometimes, it means distance. The Voynich Manuscript does not reveal its secret, because perhaps its secret is not a message, but a condition in which meaning exists without access, structure without translation, intention without clarity. And in that space, between what is written and what is understood, history does not disappear. It lingers, unresolved,